Well, if you watch TV, you probably know that right now there are literally dozens of these talent competition shows on TV. Everything from singing competitions to dancing competitions, even these cooking and baking competition shows. And I don't know about you, but from time to time I enjoy watching them. It's always nice to see people who are reaching for their dreams and sharing their talents with all of us. I'm sure many of you remember there was a British TV show a few years back called Britain's Got Talent. And famously, there was a middle-aged woman with frizzy hair and a dowdy dress who walked up on stage, and before she even sang a note, people in the audience were laughing at her. And they were laughing at her because she didn't look like what they thought a pop star should look like. One critic said she looked like someone's frumpy older auntie. Okay. But of course we know what happens. That woman's name is Susan Boyle. And Susan Boyle, if you know her story, she grew up in a small working class neighborhood outside of London. And as her siblings grew, they left the house and had careers and got married and had children, but Susan stayed at home into her middle age, caring for her mother. And when her mother died, Susan happened to see an ad in the newspaper to audition for this singing competition show. And she said to her siblings, I'm going to take the train into London and I'm going to audition for that show. And her siblings begged her not to go. They literally pleaded with her because they were afraid she was going to be made a fool of. And it certainly looked like that when she walked on stage and people were laughing. But we know what happened if you saw the clip. She sang, and out came the voice of an angel, shocking the audience, the judges, and the world. And since then, Susan Boyle, from that small little working class neighborhood, she has sold more than 40 million records. She is a multi-millionaire. She has touched millions of lives, and she travels all over the world, performing in these concert venues, in cities like Paris and Vienna and New York, places she never dreamed that she would go to. And at those concerts, people don't laugh at her. They give her standing ovations and often shout, "Bravo!" or "Brava," which is an Italian word which means brave. That's what today's gospel is all about. Having the courage to share our gifts, our light with the world, and to not do what that third servant did in the story, hide our talents. Because what will happen when we hide them is we will experience what Joan Chittister said in our words of integration this morning, that talents that we keep hidden will destroy us from the inside out. This parable of Jesus's is known as the parable of the talents, and it is where we get our word talent from. It actually comes from this story. But as we just heard, talent in Jesus' day was a sum of money. A talent was about $1,000, so a great sum of money. For the first servant to get $5,000 and to bring back another $5,000, you can see why his master was happy. Okay. But Jesus isn't talking about money here. I've shared with you before, Jesus' teachings are not to be understood at the literal level. And I know that there are many pastors, when they're talking about stewardship and trying to have you give more money to the church, they use this passage. But Jesus isn't talking about money. That's the literal level. Jesus is talking spiritually. He's talking about your spiritual gifts. That just as the master in this story gave talents to his servants, for their use to glorify and to increase this abundance, our divine master has given all of us spiritual talents to use to glorify God and to bring abundance into our life and into our world. We see what happens with that third servant. It says he is cast into darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, I want to explain to you, God does not punish you for not using your gifts. What this means is you punish yourself. That if you do not live your purpose, share your gifts and talents and your light with the world, you are going to be experiencing a life that is unfulfilled, a life that is dark and unhappy. I think of that quote by Henry David Thoreau. He said, "Most men live lives of quiet desperation, and they go to their graves with their song still in them." I think that's true. Most people are walking around living lives of quiet desperation, and they go to their graves not having expressed their song, their gift. Susan Boyle could have done that. She could have listened to her siblings. She could have gone to a place of fear and say, well, what if I'm not good enough? What if they laugh at me? She could have just stayed in that small little town. But if she did, she wouldn't be experiencing this rich, full, abundant life that God had planned for her and that God has planned for you. Now, in another one of Jesus' parables, he says, nobody takes a light, a lamp, and hides it under a bushel basket. That would be ridiculous. Jesus says, no, they take the lamp and they put it on a stand for everyone to see. And he says, in the same manner, shine your light on the world and give glory to God. That's why we're doing it. We're not doing it out of ego so that everybody can look at us and praise us. We're doing it because God gave us this gift. I shared in the epistle this week a quote from one of my all-time favorite spiritual writers, the late Leo Buscaglia. And he said, your talent is God's gift to you, and what you do with it is your gift to God. That's why we share our gifts and talents. To say thank you. Thank you for giving it. It's to glorify God, not to glorify ourselves. So why do, as Thoreau said, why do so many people go to their graves with their songs still in them? Well, I think in this parable we find out why. That third servant that hid his money in the ground, the gift he was given, he hid it. It said he did so because he was afraid. And I think it's fear. I think so many of us say, well, I can't do that. No one in my family ever did that before. What will people think of me? What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? What if I'm too old? The beautiful things about the gifts God gave us is that we continue to discover them throughout our lives. We're never too old. I'll give you just a few examples. Julia Child never cooked, ever, until the age of 40. She said, it took me 40 years to discover my passion. She didn't publish her first cookbook until she was 50, and her TV show went on the air when she was 55. Then there's J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote the Lord of the Rings series of books. He began writing them at the age of 62. And Laura Ingalls Wilder, who wrote the Little House on the Prairie series of books. She began writing them at the age of 64 and finished the last book at the age of 76. And everyone has heard of Grandma Moses, the artist known as Grandma Moses. Grandma Moses never picked up a paintbrush until the age of 78. And the reason she did was she was an embroiderer, and her arthritis was getting so bad she couldn't hold an embroidery needle anymore. So she picked up a paintbrush. And at the age of 78, she painted and painted and painted over 1,000 paintings. And her paintings hang in the greatest art galleries all over the world, places she herself never visited. So it is never too late. So what about the other things that you say to yourself, like, I'm not good enough, or what will people think of me? Well, every single year, once a year, I read to you this quote by Marianne Williamson that speaks to this. I think it's one of the greatest contemporary spiritual quotes, and I probably should share it with you more than once a year. But Marianne Williamson says this: our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Perfect. We are here. Our purpose for being is to make manifest the light of God that is within us, and we're to share that. And when we do so, we not only liberate and free ourselves, we free others. And so my question for you is, what is that gift, that talent that God gave you that needs expression in the world, that you want to manifest more fully? Maybe God is calling you to be a Stephen minister. Maybe you've always wanted to take a class and learn something new. Maybe you've wanted to travel somewhere. What is that inner voice nudging you to do? It is never too late for us to discover, to uncover, and to share our gifts with the world. And when we do so, we bring about a life of freedom and fulfillment and abundance, not just for ourselves, but for one another, for the world, and for our God. Namaste.